So, Carol Wattillo, Executive Director, Progressive Employment Concepts and Community Employment Services, is simply one of my favorite people. When Janet gave me this project, I jumped up and down. Carol is somebody that I have just incredible respect for. She has incredibly high integrity and values. She's an unassuming leader with no real interest in being a high-powered CEO of a large organization. Carol simply gets up every day to lead a dynamic team to make the world a more inclusive place. Carol's organization is completely community-based, and like growing number of hers, is changing the world one life at a time. Carol has a long history of working with Griffin-Hammis that goes back 20 years, and then with the infamous Carrie Griffin. And I think Russell Sickles, myself, and Janet have had the honor to work with her organization. One of my favorite Carrie Griffin quotes of all time is, "Customized employment is an evolutionary process." And I know that Carol knows that as well as anybody. And I'm pretty sure Carol's story will teach you a lot about organizational evolution. I hope you'll enjoy her presentation as much as I will. This presentation is really not that long, so please fill the chat box with questions and we'll take them when we take them. So Carol, take it away, please.
Awesome, thank you. All right, we're gonna attempt to share my screen here. Not the most tech savvy person, so we're gonna figure this all out together. Thanks, Corey and Beth and Janet and everybody. Everybody seeing my screen now?
Yeah.
All right, excellent.
Perfect.
So I am not any of those things Corey said, other than just a person who basically I was discontent, right? And that's how this organization started. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit about our organization. The agency I work for is called Progressive Employment Concepts, and our sister agency that we started, Community Employment Services, we're in Northern California, Sacramento area and Yolo County. So the agency's beginning really begin with my family. So my sister's 16 years older than I am, and I grew up going to work with her a lot of my time. And I refer to those years as the years that I grew up in the group home, because from the time I was about 7 till early college, I was in the group home every weekend with her and the kids that lived there. And the kids that lived there were kids who at the time had the label severely and profoundly mentally retarded, right? So those are the individuals that we now talk about who have very high support needs, who have multiple barriers to employment, to access. They're folks with communication support needs, who may communicate in different ways, who may need physical supports, etc. So after my group home years, my sister, single mom, decided to adopt children who had intellectual and developmental disabilities, eventually stopping at 5, thank the Lord, at 5. She thought 6, so my goodness. And I went on my family's journey through the service system, right? From early intervention services in the home to non-public school placements to public school placements in segregated schools to regular campuses, but back in the North 40, right? In the portables, in special ed. And then eventually to full inclusion with my younger nieces and nephews. They span in age now from 51 to 29. So we just went through that whole process. And along the way, I feel like all of the seeds of discontent sort of just started being cultivated in the garden that was my life, right? So when I saw that my nephew was going to be bused for an hour to another town to go to school rather than go to the neighborhood school that he could walk to, like, my young brain was thinking, why is that happening? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. When the people in the group home told me that they had two options for after they got out of school. They could go to the sheltered workshop program, or they could go to the day program where they could do arts and crafts all day. And these were, women in the different group homes that were to my estimation, were very competent women. So again, things I didn't understand, but things I thought, well, there must be a reason for that, right? So moving on to college, with the idea of being a special ed teacher, is where I started to see even more of the systemic, separate and unequal treatment for folks who have a label of an intellectual and developmental disability. So school looked more like babysitting and less like education. It looked more like segregation and less like the rich, inclusive schooling that I had been able to take part in, right? And then I worked at a non-public school and residential placement for kids with autism. And the youngest child that lived there was 4. And I remember thinking that I was, at the time, 20-something, raising this 4-year-old, providing for all of his supports in his home, and then helping him go to the school program. And I wasn't his parent. And I wasn't prepared to be a parent. I was 20. Didn't know anything about being a parent. And I thought, who told these families that this was the best thing for this little 4-year-old, right? And why do we do that as a system to people? It was at this time, though, too, that I met some of my mentors in the field, all of the authors and the researchers and the parents and family members and providers that were providing cutting edge services that looked very different than the services that I had been seeing in my community. It was also then that I started working in ILS and SLS, and I met the best mentors that I could ever have met, the individuals that I was supporting. And those are the folks who really were challenging what the doctors had told their families they could or couldn't do as they grew up, and going out against the odds and living lives of value and contribution in their communities, right? And so they were showing me that all of the things that I had seen didn't have to be that way if there were just options for people. So, healthy discontent, the prelude to progress, right? You can always leave it to Gandhi for a good quote. And I think this is, I don't know if it was so healthy, because I did a lot of screaming and yelling during those years. Not that I don't do as much these days. I've learned to control that. But it really was that discontent that fueled our fire to try to find something different. It was a separate and unequal education system. It was when I looked at what services were going to be like for my family members, or for the people that I was working with in ILS. And I saw services that infantilized, that devalued, that had no high expectations for people, that all of the employment that I saw at that time was sheltered workshop, substantially sub-minimum wage. My niece at one time was making 25 cents an hour, and spent close to 80 hours at this program over the 2-week period of time, and in some weeks would only get a check for 25 cents because out of that 80 hours only actually worked 1 hour of it. They mailed that check to her, which I also thought was bizarre. So yeah, needless to say, she wasn't happy with that because she couldn't do anything with a check for a quarter. So we decided to do something about it, because we didn't see what we wanted to see, and yet we knew from research and best practice that there were things that could be done. So 1995, we started Progressive Employment Concepts. There were multiple barriers. I equate it to giving birth to a child, because that's really what it felt like, this whole process. It was all the excitement and the joy, the expectation, and then there were all the things that you had to do to get ready. And then there were all the, oh, this could go wrong, or this might not happen. We were told that our regional center would, well, they had to vendor us, had to contract with us because that was the law here in California, but that they didn't have to refer anybody to us, so we were probably wasting our time. So there were lots of barriers along the way. And then we began our services. We started with 15 people and 6 staff. We were very, we had 100% community-based, so we had no site or facility. This is our office. I think we had 2 rooms. But we were still grid-centered in that the way that we organized people and how they spent their day was based on what they wanted to do and enjoyed doing, but we had not fully delved into a really authentic person-centered planning process with people at that point. We provided employment supports. So we provided anything from, one thing that we didn't like that we saw, that was everything was compartmentalized in people with disabilities' lives. If you had home support, you had home support. And if you had a job, then you had work support. But if you wanted to go to school, you had to go to another agency. So all of these things were very compartmentalized for people. And it seemed from a family perspective that that was difficult to navigate. So we were set up to provide supports across anything that folks would do maybe outside of their home. We didn't do home supports, but we did volunteer, employment, school support, community access support, learning how to ride the bus, learning how to go to the bank, all of those kinds of things, communication support, any of those things. Our employment at the time has always been directly hired at or above minimum wage. So, and that was 25 years ago. But it wasn't necessarily customized. It was more along the lines of, will you take our folks and hire them, and then we'll take care of all the support, and we'll do lots of the training and all of those kinds of things, which now we know is really not the way, not the best way to do things for folks. But we had probably in the early years, we probably had about a 50% employment rate. And our agency has always held a zero exclusion policy, which means we will serve anybody who wants our services, regardless of the challenges that they face or the challenges that presents for us as a provider or as a system. So 50% was fairly good employment, but the jobs were not necessarily customized or tailored for the individuals. We served people at a ratio of 4 to 1. We never had any more than 2 people working at a work site at any one time. So we were master puzzle workers to maintain that ratio and provide that that level of support for folks. But when I hear people say, well, we have a 4 to 1 ratio, we could never do that type of employment, etc. We did it. It wasn't easy, but we did figure it out. You know, we drove around in a really nice van, this really sweet ride. You know, I apologize to the people that we still support for that ugly old van that I think screamed. You know, I carry disabled people around. Please look at me, to everybody we passed. So we no longer have that van. We do provide transportation support to folks who need it, but we do so in cars like the rest of us drive around in. It's always been about the people. For me, it started with my family and the people that we serve, and what would I want for my family? What would I want for the people I cared about? And for those folks who just showed up time and time again and proved that any Department of Rehab case manager or service coordinator or family member who didn't believe in them or didn't believe in their capabilities to work, to volunteer, to participate in socially valued ways in their communities, that they were oh so wrong, right? This is an individual that we continue to serve, Dominic. Dominic, I have his permission to talk about him and his story. Dom's a gentleman who uses a communication device, low-tech, high-tech, eye gaze. It just depends how he's feeling, the year, the technology. He has no voluntary movement below his neck. Uses a manual wheelchair, has personal care support needs. And Dominic was one of the first people we served 20-some years ago. And his story is a great story, I feel like, for discovery and customized employment especially. So for Dominic, when he first started with us, first we were asked if we would serve him because of all his complexity. So, well, yes, we have a zero exclusion policy, so yes, indeed, we will. Oh, but, you know, but this, that, and the other thing. No, we'll serve Dominic. So Dominic went to school, took some community college classes, but he was 19, 20 years old. He was just kind of figuring out what he wanted to do. He eventually began working for us with some tech that allowed him to select text, and it would put it into letters that he would send out to staff to remind them about different things that needed to get turned in. And schedule them for meetings and whatnot. He then went on to own his own small business, a shredding business. And that was when we first met Carrie Griffin. And Carrie started talking to us about this, this new thing called discovery, or hanging out with intent. And we began to kind of follow that process with Dominic. Dominic's a good Catholic man. He has his very strong sense of right and wrong. And he's also extremely observant and holds confidentiality as a very high value, which is how his shredding business came into existence. That was something that really spoke to Dominic on a level not in the traditional way of somebody with a disability can do shredding, right? But because actually Dominic can't do shredding. He has no voluntary movement. So we had an industrial shredder rigged up with all kinds of things that the couple movements that Dominic does have. He could operate with switches. It was all good and well. And he did that for a few years and did really enjoy it. But it also, I think, paved the way for him to use discovery in a more, oh, I just got a bunch of feedback. Oh, there we go. Use discovery in a more authentic and robust manner. So we really sat down and went through the process of discovery with Dominic, which led us back to college, which led him to criminal justice classes, which led him to joining the criminal justice club on campus, which led him to a connection to the Citrus Heights Police Department, which led him to now, I think he's going on an 8-year volunteer connection to the Citrus Heights Police Department, which has profoundly, in fact, impacted their department, which then led to a employment opportunity because the city said, we want to pay Dominic to go and do presentations on diversity employment to other people in the town of Citrus Heights, in the city of Citrus Heights. But we don't really have a budget for that, but we have a grant. So if we could just give you a grant, but we know that that's money going to pay Dominic to, as part of your organization and along with your staff, to go and do these presentations. This is one way that we think we can figure that out. So that's kind of the trajectory that Dominic has followed. He is one of the few people that I give a pass on employment to, while I continue to push Dominic to look for regular paid employment. Dominic does have a trust fund. So he's one of those people in this world that gets a pass, like Paris Hilton. She doesn't really have to have a job. So just a little about Dom. So present, 2 locations, serving 126 individuals. That feels, you know, Corey talks about a small agency. That feels immense to me. But yet we are structured in a way that I think the individuals within our organization still feel like it's a small organization. We have a staff of 65. We're funded through regional centers in California, which are, you know, like maybe counties would be funded in other locations. We have started doing a lot of person-centered planning. We have a new project in California. Yes, we are late to the game, self-determination, where people will have their own budget. So we are doing the person-centered planning piece to help people kind of create their plans. Really working on how to be a more person-centered organization, and have really embraced discovery and customized employment as the only way we find employment with the folks that we work with. I'm going to pause really quick because I'm not even looking at the chat, and I don't know if there's questions or if anybody wants to stop me at this moment and ask any questions.
Kara, we currently don't have anything in the chat, but I would tell people we welcome that, and we're doing great for time. You're doing great. Maybe you could get you to talk a little bit about, the organization and the impact that you have, how about your growth pattern and how you've been smart enough not to grow too fast, because I know your organization and a very committed staff, and the concept of we're not going to take on people we can't do good work for. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, the 126 is a lot of people. We have at least that many on our waiting list for services, which breaks my heart on one hand, because I know that there are limited options for folks in the area that we work in. We have only just recently, in the last 2 years, had any other organizations that were 100% community-based, that didn't have a site or facility that they started from and went back to throughout their day. So there are limited options for folks. And so it really has been a continual and constant struggle between growth and responsibility to quality. And so I think that we've done a pretty good job at making sure that we were able in our infrastructure to support people well if we were bringing people off our waiting list. And we have, yep.
Can you talk about what I see is I give the credibility line to the voc rehab counselors that work with a lot of large organizations who decide to get into employment late in the game, and they've known each other for a long time. But the VR counselors are smart people. They refer to organizations that help people get jobs. Can you talk about how your success and maybe some of the other of the smaller, highly focused, person-centered employment organizations have helped move the system and spur on the partners in the competition a little bit?
Yeah, I think that it has been good over the years that we've developed the relationships. Like I said at the beginning, the regional center told us they didn't have to refer anybody to us. And yet right away we had referrals, and those have never slowed. And I think that is in large part due to families and the individuals that we serve speaking to their services and the difference in those services. We have a young woman that we serve that was in a sheltered workshop. She had gotten a job herself through family connections, networking, social capital, right after she had been out of high school. And then she went to college, started in college, moved out, lost that job. The company closed. And the only thing she was offered from the regional center was a sheltered workshop, which she did not want to take, but had bills to pay. And so she took that job, making sub-minimum wage, after she had been competitively employed. and then spent 10 years in that system. She is a very bright, very articulate, very gifted self-advocate. And she spent 10 years in that system. And that system really beat her down into believing that's where she belonged. And so it took her a long time to take the step out and trust our agency to support her well. And through the discovery process, she ended up at a job at our local utilities company, making, I think she makes 27 something an hour now. She makes well more than my staff make that support her.
Fantastic.
But she hedged her bets because it was a part-time job. She kept one foot in the door at the sheltered workshop until by the time she left the sheltered workshop, she was making $10 an hour, which at the time was minimum wage here. And she was making 22 at SMUD. But she hedged her bets because she wasn't sure it was going to work out, and she didn't know if she trusted to herself and the community and the support and all of those things, until they told her that because she had to change jobs because she was only working part-time in the sheltered workshop, that they were putting her back to some minimum wage. And that's when she quit. And I think that through those stories, I think it challenges, every time she tells that story, she has 4 or 5 self-advocates come up and talk to her about how to get out of that system. And I think that's what's going to really drive the change in our system. And honestly, the HCBS compliance is going to drive it. And as awful and horrific as it is, COVID-19 is going to drive that change as well. But I think that has been a key in our area. We have been asked, we were asked by our Department of Developmental Services to support other agencies in looking at how they could transition their services from segregated, site-based, non-work to community-based work support. So, and we worked with 10 organizations over the last year or so to kind of help them rethink and retool the ways that they do things. So I think it definitely, when your outcomes speak for the work that you're doing, it's good and systems change because the demand for them changes. Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. And I just have dropped another Carrie Griffin line. Carrie always says, good work gets noticed. I believe he was with you the first time he said that.
Probably. He probably told us that. We're like, okay, we're going to trust you. We're going on this ride.
Eric is asking, has sharing her story ever been recorded?
Yeah, Jackie has, she is definitely available for doing presentations. She is kind of working on her skills as a presenter because she would like to do that, because she realizes how powerful her story is, and she realizes her level of privilege that she can share her story in the ways that she can. She communicates very eloquently, etc. So she realizes that she has a responsibility to her peers who maybe can't speak for themselves as well and share their story. So she has been kind of called to share her story. I know that she's done quite a few presentations around here with our local state council. Not sure if any of them have been recorded, but I could, I'm happy to, have you shoot me an email and I can check in with her.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think one of the profound things that we have done as an organization from the beginning, and then recently here in working with some folks in around the learning community around person-centered thinking, has been to really articulate clearly our values and then operationalize those values. So over the last year or so, we have spent some time really doing some work on ourselves as an organization, right? So our 7 core values: opportunity, inclusion, choice, contribution, respect, relationships, and innovation, have become the core bedrocks for what we do and how we do it. And something that has been, Corey, I know we have talked about our staff and their value system, and that they're pretty tight knit, that they stick around, that everybody in the organization speaks the same language, has the same purpose in mind. And I think that really goes to having a very strong set of values, and now operationalizing those values. In the column on the right, you see what we expect to see from our employees. So in the areas of opportunity, what we expect to see is that people have a mindset of abundance. We don't really talk in terms of, well, there's no job openings. That's not a mindset of abundance. And so that becomes quickly checked within the organization, right? Our employment specialist working with that team says, oh, but we're not looking for job openings, right? We're looking for opportunities. Where are the opportunities? So we don't restrict by artificial parameters. We don't have set times people can work and not work. We don't serve people from 9 to 2. We serve people when they need our support. So I think all of these values have really helped guide us. And I think they give the staff a very strong sense of purpose and commitment and connection to the organization and the people that they serve, which I think makes them want to stay. When they see outcomes, when they know they're working for a greater purpose, then the purpose is greater than just John gets a job at 7-Eleven. The purpose is changing society's views, changing John's views of himself, potentially his family's views of him, etc. So, and I think the other change, and this is a little bit hard to see. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger. Nope. Is the way that we view our community development specialists. That's a new title. They used to be called support facilitators. And we changed the title to community development specialist, which we believe more accurately reflects what it is we want our direct service staff to be doing. They are the people that walk with people every day in their journey. And they, along with the individuals that they work for, hold the keys, right? It's not top down. So the community development specialist is at the center with their individuals that they serve, and all of the people within the organization in the little arrows, those are just their resources that they use. So their service coordinator is not telling them how they do things with the people that they support. They are there as a resource to help guide, facilitate, clear the way, whatever it is that needs to happen so that they can do their best work, right? And they do all of the things contained in that outer circle: coordination of services, communication with families, with funders. They do the direct instruction. They support people in volunteer and school and work and micro enterprise. They help people develop their goals. They help people, they do all of the documentation. They do all of the day-to-day supports.
Carol,
Yep.
Sorry, Carol, can you speak to, and I'm about to hear, Corey, you're 2 screens ahead of me, but having the good luck of working with your staff, and you guys do such a great job and such a commitment to staff training. But what I noticed is you have a pretty decent internal career ladder. And would you say that most of your community development specialists grew up within the organization and come with, that they're not this person right out of college with no competence, that they've been an employment specialist, they've been a DPS, they've done other stuff, that they bring a lot of value to that role?
Yeah, well, there's not a big ladder in our organization. We're purposefully flat, fairly flat, but yes, we don't have anybody in leadership that has not been with the organization at a direct service role, including myself. So yeah, we have all done the support facilitator, now community development specialist position before. That's where our employment specialists came from. That's where our service coordinators came from. That's where our directors came from. They were all direct support, which I think also really, I would say right now we have the best leadership team because of that. I think we've hired from externally one time in our 25 years for a supervisory position, and one time for a job developer position. But that person came from a sister organization in Marin County that we knew was doing good work already. So she came to us as if she had been raised up with us. And yeah, I think it's definitely a strong commitment on our part to training. We took all of the values and all of our core values and completely revamped our training program to be in line with our core values. So everything people are trained in now starts with a core value. So they're going to do 2 or 3 days on opportunity alone. They're going to do some reading. They're going to watch some videos. They're going to have some conversations with leadership. They're going to go out and shadow somebody in the field who's going to talk to them about the individual they're supporting and about how opportunity, that value, played into their life and their supports, and what they're doing now because of that. And I think it's profoundly changed how our staff see their role, and what they're doing, and the folks that we're supporting who are coming alongside of us and training people through that process as well. So I think that has been, and it has really, divine guidance or whatever it was over the last couple years, that evolution that Carrie talked about, because 20 years ago we knew about discovery and customized employment, and I feel like only in the last maybe, dominant, there were people that we were doing in spite of ourselves, we were doing good things with. But really in the last 5 to 7 years has really the fruition of all of that kind of come into play. And I think over the last 2 years, some of the things that we've put into motion really set us up to be able to handle this COVID-19 situation. And I know you guys have been doing some work talking to people about discovery and customized employment, and we appreciate that so much because we've been beneficiaries of that work that you're doing. But the beauty of being small and community-based and having the values focus and having the discovery and customized employment mindset allowed us to, within a day, revamp how we were doing things. We were told to shelter in place. The orders came down through our local counties first. Yolo County shut down right after the Bay Area did. And then Sacramento and Placer, the counties that we work in, all within a few days. And then the state shelter in place came into play. We sent a letter and a survey out to the individuals that we serve, their families and home support providers, and said, how can we support you through this? Can we support you in your home? Can we support you virtually? Can we support you in person? If you're working, we're here. We're going to support you. We closed for one day. We gathered all that information. We made calls to people who hadn't gotten the survey, hadn't been able to do it, right? It was kind of a chaotic time. Made calls to people, and the next day we opened back up, supporting people in their homes, helping out our supported living providers who were reeling, helping out our residential providers, providing support in people's local community, making sure that people could get out of the house and go for a walk around the block, making sure people could get out to the backyard and do some gardening, working with people in their jobs. We have a lot of folks who have essential employment. So we put on our mask and put on our gloves and went to work with people when they needed it. If their transportation closed, we provided transportation. We didn't worry about, oh, were we going to get paid for that? Can we get, whatever. We just did what people needed us to do because we're small enough and nimble enough to be able to do that. Virtual supports have been amazing. They do not replace people supports when people supports are needed, but the freedom to be able to FaceTime somebody at work rather than go into their job site, which is already, they're trying to limit the number of people in that situation. And the ways that our clients have stepped up and just like knocked it out of the park with being able to change and do things differently has been amazing. So we have continued over the last 2 months. We went into shelter in place here in this area March 18th. And it is not lifted yet. We are approaching phase 3 of our reentry, I think, here. But we're currently serving 90 out of 126 individuals. And the other individuals, we continue to maintain a wellness check, phone call or FaceTime call with them every week as well. But yeah, and we have only had one person that we know does not have a job to return to. We have people that have continued to work. We have had people that have increased their workload. We have people that have been furloughed only for this time, but their jobs will be there when they go back. And we've had one person that a movie theater here in town actually said they're not they're not going to reopen ever. And so he lost his job. But other than that, so far, we have been pretty unscathed. We actually had 2 people get jobs, so that was nice too. So just song lyrics for us older people. Future's so bright, you got to wear shades, right? But I really do believe that even in this scary time, and gosh, wow, with all of the racial divide right now, even more reasons for all of us to be fighting for inclusion, right? Because it's every marginalized community has to be standing together right now. And I, even through all of this, I see that the seeds of discontent that created this agency and have created change throughout time are really setting the stage for better changes, for things to evolve. Currently, we provide 4 different services that are funded by our regional center. We also provide job placement and job coaching through our Department of Rehabilitation. And we have begun funding doing self-funded services. So individuals who have self-determination budgets can buy our services separately from any vendored service or any contracted service with any government agency, which we are super excited about. We also are funded to do transition services for a handful of 18 to 22-year-olds who were fully included in a charter school, and the charter school has contracted with us to do their transition services. And then we're doing person-centered planning for folks to create their self-determination plans. And who knows what else, right? Because we're going to change with the people that we serve. What they need and want from us, what new approaches and ways that we can do things are going to direct the way that we go and the services that we provide.
Carol, there's a question here. Somebody's curious about the 10 agencies that you're supporting. Did the training that you guys do around Customize, did that help them get ready for COVID?
They were all different organizations at different levels of change and different levels of employment supports. I can tell you that 2 organizations that we support, that we were working with, actually, one was an old sheltered workshop is how they were started. They were started by families. They are in a very rural community. And then they have various day programs. They have residential services. But they have a director. She's like 4'11", and she is like a dynamo. She's an older woman who's been there a long time, and she just said, nope, we're doing it wrong. We're not going to do it anymore. Let's get going. Let's move. Let's change. And just soaks up she sent all of her staff, all of her leadership staff through ACRE training. She's doing the discovery mentoring. And that was all part of the grant that we had. We partnered with GHA to bring that in. They have been able to write a new service design to do what we call out here tailored day services, which give us the flexibility in funding and individualization to provide customized employment. And they're also, like we just funded recently out here to do discovery as a, I say standalone service, but it doesn't stand alone. It has to come with customized employment, but it's funded for just discovery, which we have never had out here before in our part of California. So our regional center funded us to do discovery. And then we are supporting our customized employment through either our regular community-based day services or through our tailored day services. So they were able to, two agencies were able to write new service designs, get new funding opportunities to be able to put discovery and customized employment into practice. Some of the other organizations were organizations that were still at the level that they were not, that the people that came to them stayed in their building, came in big buses, stayed in their building, and got 2 opportunities a month to do community-based instruction, which generally meant they went to the mall. So their trajectory now has sped up. They were wondering how could they possibly do this, and now they're like, "Whoa, crap! We're gonna have to do this." And so they're working hard on that as well.
Great. Carol, there are a number of people that I have the fortune to work with on the call with us today, and some of them serve most everybody they serve has a pretty significant complex disability and is somehow probably health-wise compromised a little bit. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking about they're not crazy about ever reopening the facility again. There are other people really concerned about big congregate transportation. Yeah. There's also some really talented people that I work with. And what happens is they work for a bigger organization and the staff turnover is so high that it's very difficult to keep the focus of the employment staff because they get called away to take care of the segregated day service. So could you think through and talk a little bit about how some people maybe could think about, with your history of all this, kind of reinventing themselves in the here and now?
We definitely struggle with that because we are not a only employment service. We have people that come to that we provide services to, who spend 30 hours a week with us, mm-hmm. Who we support in going to the gym and volunteering and taking community college classes and working. So we're sort of supporting all of those pieces, but up until COVID-19, we thought, and we're told they had to be out of their house for those 30 hours, right? Maybe they live in a group home. So we have struggled with coverage. Staff calls out sick, they were gonna go do this discovery visit, but now we've got to cover, and now we're in 2-to-1 coverage and all of those kinds of things. I would say that one of the lessons learned from this COVID-19 situation is that some of the things that we were scared of before, they got to be out of their house. We can't have them sit at home and do nothing while we work on what we know will be better eventually. So we get stuck in this just spending time with people.
Yeah.
And one of the lessons learned for all of us has been we have to push back on that. And we, as we plan for our reentry, we are pushing back on that. We are not having people come back to their schedules that they had, even if they could, if they contain what we have deemed, or they have deemed, time wasters, time fillers.
Yeah.
Because it saps our energy from doing what we really know we can and should be doing for people.
Yeah.
So we have been guilty of that. It has slowed our progress. And we are making a commitment. Check back with me in a year or two, see if we're still around with a 14% cut to our rate, 50% absenteeism, and this new strongly held commitment. But we've been through tough times before. I think we'll come out on the other side. So.
Well, Carol, thank you on that. So I know there's some organizations I support that also have some residential, and they figured out, we spend more money in the system driving people from the group home to the day center than the cost of running the day center and driving back. And like I always call it herding cattle.
Yes.
And people have made a real big commitment to, nope, we're going to start the day with somebody at home. And we're going to access the community. We're going to access employment. And then we're going to go back home, and we're not going to go to a center. And we really think that there's a cost savings there that should be able to hire more people and hopefully pay people better.
Yeah, and that's always what we've done. We did our own transportation, so none of the people that we support were ever tied into any of those not mass transit as in public transportation, but the big buses, the big, shelter workshop bus or medical transport buses. None of the folks, even from the very beginning, were tied into that because we've never had a set time that people come or go or do any of their things. Everybody has their own schedule. Even when they're in groups of 3, everybody has their own schedule and own times that they start and leave and whatnot. So we did it with a van initially, and then we just went to individual cars, which poses a difficulty, right? It's one of those other things that presents itself as a barrier. Not everybody has a car. Not everybody can drive. Not everybody is willing to drive. All of those things. Liability for the agency. We just try not to think about that.
Carol, when you look at self-determination, person-centered planning, and employment first, can you give us your vision for the next 5 or 10 years?
My vision is that all of the systems that take money away from the hands of people go slowly away, and people can take the power back themselves to hire the people that they want to hire to help them get to where they want to go. That would be my ultimate vision, because there's a lot of money sucked up in our system and our system sustaining itself, in my humble opinion. And sorry if there's people from the government here. I'm sorry. Yeah, I should have asked who was on the call and who I'm talking to, right? But yeah, I think that self-determination offers people the power to choose who provides their services, how their services are provided. It gives providers the flexibility. Anybody who's scared of self-determination, in California, there were a lot of providers who were scared that people wouldn't buy their services. They were going to lose out when self-determination came around. And to me, that was just I'm like, well, if you don't think people are going to buy your service when they have the power to buy it for themselves, shouldn't you be changing what you're doing so that people want to buy your service? right? Like I don't have any concern that somebody wouldn't want to buy our service through self-determination. The only concern I have is that maybe they will be able to find it cheaper if they just hire an individual rather than hiring an organization who has some overhead. But we have some thoughts about that as well. Some ways to maybe help with that.
Great. So, Carol, so I'm hoping to start stimulating some chatter here. I don't have anything in the chat box yet. And Dallas, I'm the crazy one who tells let's open microphones at some point. But do you have anything else? Are we ready for questions?
I really would love to hear what people are thinking and what they've done in this. GHA has put out some documents on discovery during COVID-19 and customized employment ideas, and our staff have been just eating that up and presenting that out to the rest of our staff. So that's been great. Yeah. And I would really love to hear from some other organizations and what you're doing, because we only do what we do because we've learned from other people.
So Dallas, I don't know if people have the power to unmute, or if you have to unmute people, and then if we have static, people can mute again. But can we unmute people?
Can unmute themselves.
Okay.
If they can just. It's like the little microphone icon across from your name on Teams. If you just click that.
Yeah.
Or if people want, if they can't figure out how to do it, if they could type in chat if they want to talk, and then I can find them and unmute them myself.
So Deborah or Jess or Erica or anybody, questions, comments, concerns, ideas, conversation?
I feel like we've lost people. Are you there, people? Are you breathing?
I have a question. This is Janet.
Hi, Janet.
Carol, what would you recommend to those agencies that are providing sheltered services right now? I mean, it seems like you're right. This is really a push, I mean, if we were chatting earlier before the session started that, people can't have a whole bunch of people congregate in one place.
So. I just was on the phone with an organization. They're in a rural community. They've been somewhat resistant. They have 75 people, lots of them with high support needs, folks who use wheelchairs, who have medical needs, personal care needs, all of those kinds of things. And they were going to initially just pilot this by supporting just a couple, 3 or 4 people, or maybe 2 groups of 3 people in the community, and starting to do discovery. They are now talking about, well, hey, you guys have some folks who have some really significant support needs that are probably not going to come in right away. Let's start with the other people who can come in, and let's not go into the building. Let's just, they have all the pieces. They have a funding for transportation. They have funding for their days. I said, let's just take that one staff and those 3 people that can come back right away, that they're the people they got to get out of the house as soon as they can. Let's get them, and let's just do one of these schedules for them that have all the individualized stuff that makes sense for them on it. So I think that's what they're going to do.
That's cool. I mean, that's, like some of the silver linings coming out of this, I mean, this is a good one, that it's going to encourage agencies to get people out and thinking differently about support. So,
yeah, for sure.
Carol, we there's a number of agencies I work with where we're working with people with really complex, disabilities, and we really made some good gains and some some headway with families, and I'm concerned about the word Susan Schoenfeld from CIS in Philadelphia keeps beating me this world. How do we keep people engaged, versus that lull that we come back 2 months from now and they say, well, how can you get Junior a job? For God's sake, I'm laid off. Can you speak a little bit about keeping people engaged in the employment process?
Super worried about that, because every time there's a recession, unemployment goes up, people with disabilities get left out of the conversation of economic recovery. And so I've been working with a couple groups here that we're trying to, and CalAPSI, really trying to push that we keep people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, keep that within the structure of any other economic recovery plans. So CalAPSI and some Path Forward Collaborative, some other organizations have really been trying to push with the governor any economic stimulus, anything that's going on with jobs and supporting people to get back to work needs to include people with disabilities stated clearly in connection with that, because otherwise what happens is, well, the regular people can't get a job. So
Right.
If you can't see me, I'm doing quotes, people, please. Regular people can't get a job. And like my husband said, these are regular people. Everybody's a regular person. Everybody needs a job. The same,
Yeah, here's a question. It really helps to hear what works and what doesn't or hasn't worked that you thought would have worked. Any more stories of what's worked and didn't work?
Discovery works. It honestly works, but you have to trust the process and you have to commit fully to the process. So I don't know, Erica, if you're somebody that's already doing customized employment or discovery. We did what I would call discovery light for many years, which is sort of starting with the first few steps of discovery and then going, okay, here's a job. Let's go there, rather than really following the process and really training the staff to the process, because it only takes 1 or 2 times where you see those customized jobs for people to go, oh, I get it now. That's different. Even if the job is something similar to a job that you may have found for somebody traditionally before, if you follow the process with people and it leads authentically to that job will last, and people will be more socially connected to it. They will have more skills, less support, all of those things. What else hasn't worked? Anytime we start thinking that we are better trainers for the folks that we work with in their employment, that doesn't work. We socially isolate people. We limit their skill development. We limit their opportunities within the business. So really, really taking a support role in people's training and support. And that's even for people. I went to a training one time and they talked about, who was it? I'm blanking on her name right now. But they talked about research that the even with people with significant support needs, the more that you provide an external job coach, the worse the outcomes for individuals. So even for the folks that we haven't figured out a way yet for us to get completely out, because of the level of support that they need for peripheral things, going to the restroom, communication, whatever, we really still try to take a back seat. So, yeah.
Carol, this one's going to be Janet and I together. But one of the things I see when I do training around the country is there's somebody in the training that is a little disappointed at the end. They're like, could you come teach my boss this, because I've gone through all this great training and then I'm going to go back and my boss is going to say, but this isn't how we do it. So training, we see things happen when the executive director actually goes through ACRE training. And then that's mine. And then Janet talks about, and I reinforce this, that your commitment to staff training is impeccable. And I think it's the reason for your success, where, some people are always just looking for the shortcut. We have people come through ACRE training and they're just kind of a butt in the seat and they're not going to do this stuff. But can you talk about, how you stay focused on the staff training and your thoughts about, with the leadership process and the change process, that how do we engage more leadership people in moving particularly from discovery light to the real thing?
Yeah. So for us, and I guess since my husband and I founded the agency, we've always been very hands-on with all of that. Any of the books that are in our library, our resource library for our staff, we've read already, because I'm not putting something out there for people that I don't believe or think is gonna be good. So we're kind of micromanagers in that respect. But so we've always gone through all of the trainings, and I think everybody, every level of the organization has to commit to something like discovery and customized employment. I know there's organizations, large organizations like Debbie down in San Diego, where they have a large organization that does a lot of different things, and some of it not individualized and some of it not customized. But she just created the niche within the big organization and put it in a bubble and protected it, right? And so it can be done, but she bought in at the highest level and then made sure everybody under her was trained and bought in. So I think that is a critical piece, because it is so hard to work against that. I also tell people, go out and do it. Start your own, right? Go out and do it. If you find yourself beating your head against the wall so long that it's just not going to change, I'm all for working within the system to change it, to change those monsters. I've seen them change. But at some point you gotta, if you're the kind of person who believes in this, go do it, right? And self-determination and those kinds of things. We have people out here that I'm friends with in CalAPSI who just started, and they're not vendorizing with a funding source at all. They're just supporting people through self-determination in customized employment and discovery. So that's phenomenal. Maintaining and getting people to stay the course on the process. I think one of the keys for us was when our employment specialists went through the discovery fidelity scale training. I think that was really, really helpful. Really solidified things for people. And I think it gave it credence, like this is this is research-based, tested through university. Some people that it takes that for them to, go, okay, this is a real thing. It's not just hanging out with intent. So I think that's one of the ways to help people stay the course. And don't put pressure on people for placement numbers. If you put pressure on people for placement numbers, they will go out and place people at McDonald's, and then they'll be back through your door 2 months later because McDonald's didn't work out for them.
So, Carol, we're down to 4 minutes, and I think we can run longer. I just want to make sure to thank you. Thank you, Janet, for backing up Dallas. And again, open this up to Janet and I have been friends with Carol for years. We get to, share with her all the time. But any other people with any questions? Oh, somebody was asking about your PowerPoint, and somebody from Hawaii. So you can make that decision if you're good with sending that or not. We can work with you after that. Anything from anybody else for the good of the order on this?
I can personally deliver it to Hawaii, after all this shelter in place is done.
You're invited. You're invited, sweet one. I don't know when Governor Ige is going to be lifting that. Inter Island, I think, is June 16th finally. But I'm just was signing off. So I wrote something in the chat, but just God bless you all. I'm going to another Zoom meeting with self-advocates who are very determined from 5 Islands.
Nice.
And yeah, so anyway, bless you all. Thank you for another awesome training. And I worked in Oregon and Washington a lot for years, working with it was awesome time working with employment and DVR and customized employment. So
Excellent.
bless you all. Thank you. Mahalo.
Thanks,
you.
Gary.
Yeah.
Thanks, Erica.
All right. Oh, I don't think I ever stopped sharing my screen, did I?
Oh, you're fine.
I can do that.
I'm assuming that is your last slide.
That was it. That was it.
This is Jen. I just want to say, I think you folks at PEC have done such a fabulous, I think you do a fabulous job all the time, but it sounds like what you've been doing through COVID is really remarkable too. And it's what we want to see everybody doing all the time. So you're just a great example out there, Carol.
No, thanks, Janet. It's not